Hello, everybody, and it's a great pleasure to see so many of you, or so many of us. My name is Elena Raviola, and I am Torsten and Vanya Söderberg's professor in design management at the University of Gothenburg. And I have the great pleasure to organize this with Ulla and Agnes to celebrate Barbara's 50 years work in academia.
And Agnes, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yes, my name is Agnes Faxén and I'm the press officer at Gothenburg Research Institute, and I have been talking to some of Barbara's colleagues and friends from the years past.
For these 2 hours, we have collected some stories around the globe in the search for Barbara, and we have invited some people to help us discuss Barbara's ideas and work and what the future looks like. Our guiding lines have been to follow some traces that we found in Barbara's work, and these traces have taken us to different places in times and space. Our ambition for these 2 hours is not to paint a representative picture of Barbara, but to give some shades of Barbara's works through different voices. There are 2 parts. This first hour, we will see 2 movies Agnes has organized for us. And then in the second hour, next hour, we'll have a panel. And we will introduce people as they come along here. Voices from North America and voices from Europe. This is not a specific reference to the work of Barbara, as her ideas and work has never been limited by in such a way, but more our choice from practical reasons. I have to say we are very nervous as well, at least some of us, not Rolf Solif, of course, but the other ones, the good girls, her former PhD students. We know we will fail in one way or another today, but we hope it will be an improved failure to make a reference of what to be seen here soon. For questions, if you have specific questions, we will not have time to let everyone talk during the seminar, but please write your questions and comments in the chat, and we will try to summarize these as we go along and bring them up during the seminar. And these will also be saved and presented later, perhaps in a written account from the seminar. I have promised never to take part in this kind of festschrift to Barbara. And this is not a festschrift, Barbara. I will just tell you, this is not a festschrift. But anyone who would like to say something, write something to her, this is the opportunity in which I will take part. Otherwise, you can do whatever you like. As for the first movie, some words will continue here. As we all know, Barbara's work is of a tremendous width. It covers many new concepts, introduction to new concepts, new methods, and new ideas. The first film will provide some example of this, and I will just give some words about the setting. A few years ago, when we were moving offices, Barbara showed me a book with a special dedication, a book from her library. It was the Glaser and Strauss Ground Theory from 1967. And the dedication was by the former professor in organization theory and administrative studies in Gothenburg, Walter Goldberg. The dedication was from second half of 1970s, said something like, "This might be of interest to you." She then told me how this book had totally changed her research interest. And the first step for ethnographically inspired work was then taken. We are all familiar with this work that have followed from this, including studies of reforms from the Swedish public sector, organizing of big cities in Warsaw and Rome, the production of news agencies as Reuters and the Swedish TT, to name but a few. Adding to this, we as a former PhD students have continued to work in the same way, many of us being ethnographically inspired too. Another part here, another perspective of Barbara's work relates to feminism and to gender studies. I will say relate, as we are about to hear. This follows her works of ways of working. Barbara performs gender studies rather than advocating a specific ideology within the feminist approaches. As one example of this, among her research studies is one with Guye Sevon, where they set out to study who is referred to in scholarly work. It turned out that both men and women scholars predominantly refer to men. In order to counteract this, Barbara and Guye suggest that we should add the first name on the scholars when we write our reference lists. That is not only use the initials that is common today. By adding the first name, we can at least guess the gender of the person cited. And hopefully that will be a way for each of us to reflect upon how our own practices are gendered. In the first film, we have 3 different persons talking about this part of the work. One is Professor John van Manen, Professor of Organization Studies, Emeritus at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Barbara spent a year at MIT early 1980s, and that not only led to more of the ethnographically inspired work, but she also introduced the ideas about culture in the Scandinavian setting and continued to develop this into a focus on stories and narratives. Together with John van Manen is Linda Smrzic, Professor of Management at the Eisenberg School of Management, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Marta Kallas, also Professor of Management Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Agnes, would you like to share the film with us?
It's like following along in her thought process, and it's very, from time to time, you're going to get zapped, or you're going to get, you know, a zinger is going to get in there.
Surprise!
She's gonna make some sort of ironic twist where you're going to go, what? Wow! So you're always waiting for the next spark of irony or humor or a surprise.
Yes.
So it's fun.
Yeah, that fun is a very good way to describe her writing, because it's never boring. You can go from beginning to end without feeling like, oh, I have to put it down because I cannot bear to see one more word in this book. No, it's just the opposite. It's, oh, I want to know what is going to be the surprise as we go along. And so that is, I think, not only her intellectual capabilities, but as a writer, what an incredible writer she is, that she can make it so alive. I mean, it's that kind of scientific writing at its best, because scientific writing should really be something that captures the imagination of the reader, where innovation otherwise wouldn't happen. And so this is exactly how her work is. You know, it makes you think beyond what you would have thought otherwise.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm John van Manen. I'm an emeritus professor at the Sloan School. I'm a self-defined ethnographer, sociologist, and I've studied the police among other organizations, but I've spent a good deal of my career studying the police. Which is where Barbara came in. I was just getting started. I started at MIT in '72 and spent my career there. Although I taught as a visitor for a couple of years in France and a year in England, and research leaves and various other ventures. But that's fairly unusual these days to spend your career at one place. Most people move around. Barbara certainly has. I'm really impressed by all the work she's done.
So I am Marta Kallas. I am very good friend with Barbara since time immemorial. And I am a professor at the University of Massachusetts, Eisenberg School of Management. I am an organizational studies professor, and is basically, I teach in both graduate and undergraduate programs, which is required of all of us, the faculty, no matter what position we have, actually. So, and therefore I have been doing research on gender and organization for many, many years, but not exclusively, because also my position is as an international management scholar. And so I also do work in international management.
Thank you.
I am feminist scholarship in all kind of conditions, be national or transnational, in whichever shape or form.
Great, thank you.
So I'm Linda Smirchik, and I'm also a longtime colleague and friend of Barbara. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about that. So I was a professor of organization studies, also at the Eisenberg School of Management at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I retired about a year ago and have been enjoying the wonderfulness of that sort of existence. Keeping alive intellectually, but also doing some politics for our election this past year.
How would you describe the significance of the research of Barbara Czarniewska?
Well, it's eclectic. It's very broad. The ActionNet stuff has gotten a lot of followers. Her shadowing methodology is very popular and very popular with our students as well as those in Europe. I think the most powerful work, at least to me, is the narrative. Her work on translation, her work on stories and the power of stories from Brunner on. She's resurrected Tardet's work, brought it back. So, but it's extremely powerful and there's a lot of it. And you can't exactly pinpoint where the, what her interest is so broad. I think she's done a lot for city managers. She's done a lot on change theory, and really, that was also what was going on at MIT in the 70s. Ed Schein, Dick Beckard were organizational change theorists. And Barbara was very much taken with their work, although she didn't follow their methods. But I think that sort of got an interest going in following change efforts from inception to unanticipated consequences at the end. Yeah. So that's an influence on her.
You know, so it's the orientation that she's bringing. It's her way of looking. So it's not that she's pounding away a particular school of thought idea that's fixed. Rather, it's what's important is how you do the looking. So we have the world that's constantly in motion, and you can train your eyes to be looking at what's happening through this thinking historically, thinking ironically or paradoxically, or the inconsistencies, the contradictions, maybe that's the better word there, and with the critical posture. So it's more the mindset, the orientation.
Well, I mean, some people would say that certain critical work is very political, a political meaning in relationship from the politics of the outside world, you know, in a way in which the world may be changed by a particular line of political thinking. And that's not Barbara. Barbara is actually much more the one person that would make us, Linda says, because the world is changing. Yes, because Barbara's work is always in process. And when she's looking at the world in motion as it occurs, she's also paying attention to details that those of us who have a more critical orientation in the sense of more political in that way, we'll go for the big picture and maybe we lose track of what is really creating the moments in which the problems are occurring. And the way Barbara works in the details really give us a different view, a view of these are micro moments in which things are happening, and that those of us who like the big picture and, you know, cataclysmic change may be missing, you know, and then becoming disappointed because the change didn't happen as we expected. And so I think that in a way, when Linda say Barbara work is ironic, yes, it's ironic, but it's ironic because it's very realistic. You know, it's really this, there is irony in our everyday life.
Yeah.
And when you see that way, you don't get distracted by, you know, ideologies that would provide, you know, if the revolution came, the world is going to be much better. She doesn't, I don't think she has that kind of posture. That her posture is, you know, we have to really critique at the moment in which the most minute thing is happening. And at the same time, you know, isn't it ironic that this is happening? It is almost like that really very realistic posture. And I think a very sane one, because, you know, we can drive ourselves crazy trying to make rapid change. and I don't think that's where she is.
Well, I think her own biography is obviously going to be part of this. I mean, how her growing up and reinventing herself also in Sweden, and you know, being a minority figure in economics and all of this kind of stuff, it makes a difference from in contrast to me growing up in the US with a very sort of perhaps parochial perspective on how the world is, versus when you've lived through the kinds of transformations that she's lived through. You know, it makes a difference in how you see things, and you don't have this dewy optimism about how the revolution is going to come and make everything better, because we haven't seen evidence that that's happening.
Yeah.
I think we'll be narrating the organization and the series of work that follows on that for 20 or 30 years. It'll be a kind of a classic. I don't know about the fashion and imitation stuff, mainly because I haven't read it all, but that seems to me to be a novel twist. I think our fields, organization theory, whatever we want to call it, institutional theory, the theory is so overstuffed and overwritten. We've got more theory than we could possibly use. And the idea of sorting through it and calling out what is timeless. In some sense, Barbara's revitalization of Gabriel Tarde is interesting because that goes back 100 years in an interesting way of making it relevant again. I think we need more of that. Need more of sorting through the theory rather than adding to it. Although the journals are probably the worst offenders of all. Without the journals' emphasis on theory and making a contribution, whatever it may be. I think of contributions as to Oxfam or the Salvation Army or to your favorite charity, not to theory. But with the demand to make contributions to theory, it flattens the work, makes it inaccessible to a broader audience. We're writing to fewer and fewer people. And I see it at MIT and I see it around the world.
So if you just turn towards Barbara, what would you like to say to her now when she's celebrating 50 years in academia?
Wow. We love you, Barbara.
Yes.
That's and there's nobody like you.
Yes.
That's the thing.
The absolute
there's-
uniqueness of herself, as in every possible sense that we will talk about. But we, of course, couldn't be happier to be in her presence, in whichever form we would be in her presence and celebrating her life and work. Is so absolutely marvelous moment.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess at this point in normal circumstances, we would maybe, I don't know, clap or something. But I would really like to thank you, Agnes, for these interviews, and would also like to thank John, Marta, and Linda for these dear words in this, as you say, absolutely wonderful, marvelous moment for us. So before going on and listening to a few more voices about Barbara's work, and then discussing with our panelists, I would like here to take a few moments to catch some words from John, Marta, and Linda, and weave them into my own story of Barbara's work as a means of introducing our next clip. And please go on if you have sort of reflections or things you want to share, please go ahead and use the chat. So for me, the biggest legacy that Barbara's work leaves us with, and probably the biggest legacy that I am also trying to pass on, is her practice of scholarship, her curious, generous, ironic, and grounding making of science, and perhaps also of simply being in the world. And I have to say that in navigating the current developments of academia, as an almost middle-aged scholar and immigrant in Sweden, this legacy has become for me a necessity and a survival kit. So Barbara wrote in a text about her pragmatist influence in 2011 that she, like Martha Nussbaum, believes that philosophy exists to help people to cope with life and work. And this is precisely, I think, what Barbara's legacy is about, helping us to cope with academia and also making it better. So the scholars that you will see in a couple of minutes that I will introduce will articulate this much better than me, but let me please introduce them by pointing at some of the tools that I sort of include in this, what I call survival toolkit. First of all, I would like to paraphrase John van Manen, and playing with his words, I would like to say that the first tool is to understaff the overstaffed theory in organization and management studies. I don't know how many times I've heard Barbara's asking me and also others what we really and actually mean what we write, what we really mean with these difficult words that are piled up onto each other, and also with all these very long parentheses of references that perhaps we have not really read. And this is a decisive question, important for younger and older scholars, I believe, not to lose sight of the real world. This is an anti-essentialist but not anti-realist approach, one that Richard Rorty has written about. And this is also a common line of sort of inquiring approach in Barbara's work. This also teaches us that this is a matter of respect for both the readers, for both the reader for whom we write, and also the interlocutors in the field studies with whom we interact. Both the readers should be able to understand the text we write, which is, not always easy at times in the development of our field. And also the interlocutors should recognize their own realities in this text. So the second point that I would like to bring up here is, and that sort of is included in this legacy that I want to bring forward, is that scholarship is a lot about, if not all about, writing. It is about writing. It is about this detailed writing, and it is about writing openly, accessibly, and ironically, as also Linda and Marta point out. As Marta put it, the incredible writer that Barbara is has inspired generations of researchers to a different way of studying and writing about organizations. Her posture, as mentioned before, is ironic and always curious, and I would really like to bring up this curiosity as almost a method of inquiry. It is through this writing that research happens, and not with an a priori ideological stance, but with a genuine curiosity, an ironic gaze. That's why Barbara's writing, for example, is always feminist, even when feminism is not in the declaration of intent. And as Linda put it, you're going to get zapped at some point in the text And that's a fantastic moment in this, and a fantastic sort of capacity of the text. And that's, I sort of associate with this standing on the boundaries, standing on the borders, standing on the fence between an insider and outsider, and sees ideas traveling around, speaking at some places and fading away in other places. So even when her writing is not about the travel of ideas, Barbara writing permeates the travel and transitions that she has herself experienced through time and space. So in the next clip, we will hear a few words from Guye Sevon, that had been a long-time collaborator of Barbara and friend. And their work on travel of ideas has been very influential, to say the least. Guye is Professor Emerita, retired from a chair in economic psychology at Stockholm School of Economics in Sweden. And between 1993 and 2001, she was also Professor of Management and Organization at Hanken School of Economics in Helsinki. And she has also been important for sort of our Scandinavian travels because she was one of the 5 founders of the Research Institute Skankor, or the research group Skankor at Stanford University. And now I would like to just take up the third and final point of this toolkit that I have been talking about, and that's the encouragement to go to the border, to the liminal spaces, to the boundaries where things are not settled, where they are unclear, and where disciplines meet. And these are the places where norms are less bounding, insecurity might grow, but these are the places where things are meaningful and not boring, as we will hear in a minute. And perhaps most importantly, at least for me, these are the places where possibly there is freedom. Barbara's incredible extensive experience of field studies testify this. Whereas many senior scholars might have a vague memory of the past when they were in the field, and after many years of academia, this was a sort of vague past, Barbara's own journey reminds us of the importance of studying the field, having questions about reality, genuine questions in our discipline. And as she often said herself, this is not about passion for field work, or this is not about passion about a specific field. This is about a genuine curiosity to find out what she doesn't know for real. And this is also the position of, being on these boundaries where things are not settled. This is the position of a thin edge of the wedge that she talks about in this article that also Ulla has mentioned about foreign women in academia. In the video, we will see Fabrizio Panozzo, who has encountered Barbara from accounting and through Anthony Hopwood, and he will tell more about this in the next clip. Fabrizio is Professor of Management at Ca' Foscari University in Venice, and it's sort of also a story from the borders that we would like to share with you. At these borders, new ideas and fashions might be visible earlier than in the mainstream. And Barbara's many novel ideas have been very early for her contemporary times, perhaps too early, as she has sometimes lamented herself. Ideas like translations, narratives, overflows, the influence of popular culture and management, which now are very popular, came in Barbara's work before their time. So I really agree with John Van Manen that we will probably read the narrating the organization for the coming 20, 30 years. And this was before its time. So before getting to the next clip, I would like to just introduce the ones that will talk. So Guye, that I have already introduced, Fabrizio Panozzo, and the third voice that we will hear is the voice of Franck Auchois. Franck is a professor of sociology at the University of Toulouse in France, and he is one of France's most influential economic sociologists and has extensively published in the area of critical marketing and consumer culture, specifically about market mediations between producers and consumers. And you will hear also the story of how Franck has connected to Barbara and also has been very important for Gothenburg. So without further ado, I would like to ask Agnes to share with us the second video.
Hello, Fabrizio Panozzo, Ca' Foscari University of Venice. I'm in management, in the Department of Management, and my current field of interest is mostly on cultural management and the management of cultural institutions and creative industries. But my original background is in accountancy, organizationally and sociologically inspired accounting. And this is where I came across the work of Barbara, because she was, let's say, very inspirational for us studying accounting, not as a mere technique of computation, but as a more expanded notion of technology of calculation. And she was fundamental for my work and for the work of many in that field.
I am Guyo Sibun. I am professor at Stockholm School of Economics in emeritus nowadays. My field is economic psychology and management and organization theory. And these are fields that are very close to what Barbara has been doing, working in her career as a researcher.
I'm Frank, I'm 56, and I'm married with Natalie, who is a professor in American literature. I have 2 grown-up children and even a Volvo car. So on the professional side, I'm a professor of sociology at Jean Jaurès University in Toulouse, in France, and I'm working in STS and economic sociology. Well, basically, my research is focused on the technical mediations that connect supply and demand. And so like marketing, packaging, self-service, all kind of mediations and technical mediations most of the time. I also address a variety of strange objects like feminine care products and sanitary masks recently because of the COVID crisis.
So when was the first time when you interacted with Barbara?
It was during my doctoral studies. I actually wrote to her. I was conducting my PhD research under the supervision of Anthony Hopwood, a close friend of Barbara. And I came across her work on the public sector originally because my interest was in accounting in the public sector and the way in which accounting was instrumental in designing a new notion of what the public organization should do and how. And at the time, she was involved with other, she had started with other scholars in Europe, a very peculiar way of looking at the way in which reforms were being copied from one country to the other, and how reforms looked the same, more or less. And she came up with this, together with others, with this very interesting notion of management as a new Latin, management as something that was spreading as a language, and sometimes being becoming a dialect locally, or constructing a new language, sometimes just being replicated over and over again with the same English words, but also, and that was the peculiar angle I was looking at, the way in which the same words and the same inputs are actually translated in other contexts. And translation was a fundamental notion that she contributed to channeling into management via, or taken from the work of Bruno Latour. And that was the other fundamental contact point with Barbara, her ability to bring in that peculiar way of looking at innovation and at organizations that Bruno Latour had started. And that was the origin. It is creative and localized and deeply cultural. So if I had to pick one point, is the culturality of management and of management studies, which contradicted and keeps doing it, a vision of management as a technique which is good everywhere for everyone, under every sky and under every condition, because it is based on the Western rationality of performance, calculation, maximization. But this, of course, is not true. But we deeply, desperately needed and still need someone that would frame this understanding of management as a practice, management as something that is done locally by humans that have histories and have institutions. Management happens within histories, cultures, and institutions. And in practice, we all know, they all know, people in practice, they all know that this is the case, that what they are doing is an exercise of translation. But Barbara helped us understand that the translation can be a conceptual framework. So translating is, from its Latin origin, it's not only, I would say, it's not only a matter of meaning, it's a matter of place. You translate, you move things. You can move humans from one place to the other, and when you translate, you lose meaning, because meaning gets lost in translation, but meaning gets added in translation, and what you end up with is a never-ending process of adapting to the local, while at the same time speaking the global or the general. This is why Latin, as an analogy, was particularly significant for me as a doctoral student at the time, mostly coming from Italy and from the country that originally generated that language and that mechanism of government, because Latin was not only a language, it was a way of doing things and a way of doing government across Europe. So governmental mechanisms have been translated for 1,000 years across Europe. And this idea that management, at the time, we're talking about the late 90s, management was doing the same. What management was creating unity, while at the same time allowing for the possibility of interpretation, localization, even ironic localization, the possibility of playing with words. And that was something that was a great interest for me. The mistakes in translation. You pick a notion and you adapt it to your local context by making reference to your own language, to your own institution. Basic notions like performance or notions of control, they can mean something which is radically different from the original Anglo-Saxon notion embodied into management, because they have to negotiate space and meaning within an institutional construct. And that was, I think, particularly significant for my understanding of management in general and accounting in particular as the quintessential objective formula. We think of accounting as something that should be the same because it is about numbers. But the fundamental contribution of Anthony Hope on the one side and on the accounting side, and Barbara on the organizational studies side, was to train us, our generation, to train us in this capacity to look at technique as something that gets incorporated into societies and cultures.
Well, I think we first met in 2002. There was a conference in Gothenburg. The name was Elusive Consumption, and it was an important conference for you because it was to celebrate the launching of the Center for Consumer Research, the CFK. And but I was there as a substitute of Bruno Latour. I think he could not come. And so it was a strange experience because I was lost among US stars in consumer research, American scholars. And I think no one paid attention to my talk except Barbara and the Swedish colleagues. So a few years later, I received an invitation from Barbara. She proposed me to be a visiting professor in Gothenburg. And it was quite a commitment because it was for 2 months a year period for 4 years. And so, and I benefited from incredible conditions, and this started the story. So, yeah.
And naturally, you have influenced each other during the past years. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I don't think it's possible to influence Barbara. So it's the other way around. I just hope it is possible sometimes to attract her attention. So, but her influence on my work and moreover on my life has been tremendous, because I owe her a lot of things, a long-standing connection with Sweden and the Swedish colleagues. I also got a very nice hat and ring, because I became a Doctor Honoris Causa. I also developed with the Swedish colleagues 2 research projects. One was on consumer logistics. The other was the digitalization of consumption. And from there, I mean, we have been doing countless contributions, and we still have some of them coming out soon, like a book on price tags. But the academic things are not the most important things. What is important, I have now a lot of friends, and so yes, this is because of this collaboration.
What would you like to say about Barbara?
Well, as a psychologist, I'm sort of interested in what is a person that is Barbara? What is she? How come she has managed to be such an excellent researcher? She has been doing research for 50 years, and she has a result in new ideas and narratives that have traveled to all continents and very much inspired social scientists to look for phenomena in organizations and management in new ways. This is something that very few researchers do. She's very innovative. And she's writing about those innovative ideas with a beautiful language. She has an excellent sense of language. And these are aspects that contribute to her success, of course.
So because everybody knows, of course, that Barbara's contribution is outstanding, as she has been publishing so many books, so many articles, and so we owe her a lot of notions like action nets, or also her interest for storytelling in organizations, or what can I say, mastery in terms of research methods. She has been developing, for instance, the approach of shadowing. So I will not repeat the list. I mean, it would be impossible or too long. So I really think that Barbara's greatest contribution lies elsewhere, and I would say it's her attitude. She's a person who shows ceaseless curiosity. She's always challenging people, but also encouraging them. So and so it helps us moving forward. She has an incredible energy and a lot of creativity, and she has the will to bring knowledge in the arts with austere themes like organization studies. That also one distinctive contribution, and also have fun while sharing serious findings. So she's like a model, you know. She's has a nice attitude. She's an original person, and so this is the most important, I think.
We are the Barbara community. We are weird people. We tend not to like boundaries, or to like boundaries to the extent that we are attracted by the place in which things begin to fade and they become something else. So this is what she taught me, to be at ease on that gray area, not to fear the unexpected, not to fear the frictional. There's a famous book by Gregory Bateson that is, I think the title is Where Angels Fear to Tread. And she has encouraged us not to fear to tread there, on those spaces in which our so-called discipline becomes something else. So in this, technically, she has taught us to be indisciplined, not disciplined by the academic environment. And that's, I think, in general, it's a intellectual contribution, in particular to the state of things in the Italian academia, in the social sciences, this ability to create interests and create alliances, create connections between people and fields that wouldn't otherwise have been talking to each other.
Do you think that this interdisciplinarity is going to continue and grow in the future?
I'm skeptical and pessimistic about the growth of this. And I know Barbara has been from time to time skeptical about the legacy of her work, because it is, as I said before, it is much easier said than done. It is a discourse that you have to conduct, this one of interdisciplinarity. It is very much celebrated on paper. On paper, that's what we are supposed to do. But then you have to face the departmental politics and the politics of career. And this is where you are invited silently to do the opposite, to stay within the boundary and to stay the boundaries of your community, and to adopt the correct language of your community. Management studies, they've been through cycles. I think the beginning of the century, in the late 90s, early this century, I experienced a much more open and receptive intellectual environment to proper interdisciplinarity. There was a genuine interest in conducting this type of research. And after that, I've seen the discourse increasing, but the practice is decreasing. The discourse has boomed, but then the fields, my feeling is that the fields have been closing up recently, despite notions like sustainability that would invite us to cut across fields. But the mechanisms of knowledge production, they tend to force us into domains that we label. But again, that's the beauty of it. We need to fail in that endeavor to cut across boundaries, because we need to fail better every time. And I think the history of Barbara, if I may, the intellectual history, is a history of failure, but always an improved failure. So she has failed better every time. Every time she has taken us on a boundary, we've been trying to cross that boundary. We've been trying to create connections. We have politically failed. We haven't been able to really construct an interdisciplinary community across Europe, or comparatively said, the others, those that remained within the mainstreams, within the boundaries, they have been better. They've been much better than us in terms of career, in terms of credibility, in terms of so-called measurement of performance, of the impact of knowledge. Their numbers are better than our numbers because they've been able to control the discourse, but we had much more fun.
Thank you, Agnes. Thank you, Guye, Fabrizio, and Frank, for these wonderful words about Barbara's work. And yes, fun is our word, as we have heard from different voices. And there are many that haven't come to these voices, many within the organization and management studies community, and many in other disciplines that Barbara has collaborated with. I see here Orvar. I think that the overflow work with Barbara and Orvar will also become a classics, but I will not say more because I have a vested interest in this. But before we take a small break, I would just like to say, everybody, that if you have questions or comments, and I see that Pierre has commented, if you have questions or comments, please write in the chat. That would be very nice. And I just would like to see if Barbara wants to say something, or if she wants to take a break. She wants to take a break. Yes, okay. Wonderful. Then let's take a 5 minutes break and be back at 15:01.
Is Barbara back?
Yes, she's here.
Barbara, could I ask you a question, and you can just give an estimation if you're not sure. Could you say how many co-authors you have had? How many people you have written with, more or less, and how many PhD students you have had?
Yeah, the second question is easier because I think it's 42 or 41. As to the first one, I really don't know.
Okay, but we have, at least that anyway, we have collected some of your co-authors for this next session here, and it's time for the panel. And for this, we have invited Kerstin Sahlin, Professor of Public Management in the Department of Business Studies at Uppsala. Currently the third Vice President of Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences and Chair of the Research Program, WASP HS. WASP-HS. I don't know how you say that in English, Kerstin, but we're very happy to have you on the panel. The next person on the panel, another co-author here, is Rod Solly, who has been the director of GRI, but he is also, of course, Professor of Management Studies, especially focusing on processes of management, leadership, and accounting, in mainly context of public sector organization. Rolf, I hope he's here somewhere. It's hard to see him. The third person, he is representing the 41 or 42 of us. Kjell Tryggestad, if we are correctly informed, you are the first PhD student of Barbara. Today, you're professor at Handelshögskolan Inlandet, the Faculty of Economy and Social Sciences in Norway. And if I may just roughly summarize research, it's about objects, materiality, and buildings. That's a very rough introduction here. Sabina Siebert is the fourth person on the panel, and she is a professor of management in the Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow. You collaborate with Barbara, for instance, on the topic of spies. But you also do studies on advocates and the parliament. We are very happy to have you here in this panel with us. And just a brief tour the table as a start with. And we would like to hear if you would like to share your first encounter with Barbara. So Kerstin, you're first out here.
Okay, thank you. Well, I came to the F section at Stockholm School of Economics in 1986, just after I had received my PhD from Umeå University. But before 1986, I was also a regular guest at the F section. It was during one of these visits that I met Barbara the first time. This woman, Barbara. And I was extremely impressed. My memory from this first encounter is that she was much respected, impressive, scholarly, and literary knowledge, extremely productive, had very clear views, and she always had international visitors. I always remember that there were international visitors there with her. So I was impressed, even a bit afraid, but soon got to know her and appreciate her company immensely. She has also and continues to be so supportive, a real friend, encouraging, always inviting to both listen and responding. Wonderful dialogues over the years. So honestly, I don't think I would ever have made it in academia without her.
Thank you, Kerstin. Rolf, would you like to share when you first met Barbara?
Well, I don't remember actually. I think it was that I visited F section, something maybe 1984 or something like that. And I think Barbara was there. There were other people I remember more at the time, but I think she was there. And then second time I met her was in Milano. She gave a speech at the conference, and it was a fast one. I think she had 30 minutes to talk, and after 6 minutes she was finished. And we were all so impressed because everything that was important was said. Third time I met her was she was opponent at Sven Wiberg's thesis, something in 1985 or something like that, 6 maybe, and that was also fast. And the fourth time I met her was when we started to organize managing big cities, and then we have been close friends since this, I must say. And nowadays we most eat lobsters together and have a nice time. And I don't think you are co-author with Barbara. Don't be in her way is my recipe when you work with her. So don't try to stop her or do anything like that, because she will do it anyway. So she's fabulous.
Kjell, the third person on the panel here, would you like to share when you first met Barbara?
Yeah, very much so. It was actually the first time I ever did an elevator speech. You know, when you have to speak fast. And literally, we were meeting in the elevator, descending from the 3rd to the 1st floor at the Department of Business Administration at Lund University. I had a kind of desperate search for a supervisor. And I had met Barbara before that at a seminar, but I hadn't addressed her. But at that point, I recognized she can actually help me to do something with my PhD that was in a kind of desperate search for guidance. And she said yes during that elevator speech. It took about 10 seconds, I think. But that actually provided me with a guidance, because I was searching for somebody that had an interest in technologies. And she had told me that there was this new STS scholarship in Bruno Latour and Michel Callot, and then she opened up a whole new world for me back then. And that was very important for me. And as you all know, she has done a lot of interesting stuff herself, developing this further into her own concept of ActionNet. And for me, that was a decisive moment in my career, that I could build upon her work and her knowledge about things that at that time, I think there were very few scholars, especially at business schools, that know anything about actor network theory, for example. She was decisive in introducing that kind of thinking and perspectives in our universe at the business schools. So she was very, very important, not only for me, I think, but also for a broad range of scholars, not only in Scandinavia, but also internationally.
Thank you, Kjell. I think as former PhD students, we recognize 10 seconds. I would say maybe 2 minutes for me in my first supervision meeting with Barbara. And that's such the agenda I had been searching for. So thank you very much once again. I think that's many years ago. Sabina, you know Barbara both in Polish and in English, I think, and that is saying something about all these different things that we get through Barbara, please.
So I'll start by saying that one of my regrets in life is that I wasn't Barbara's PhD student, and I always thought, what a fabulous start to a career this must be. So I'm all envious of all the 42 of you, who most of you probably are there. I had always been a fan of Barbara's work for 2 reasons. One is because I had this affinity because she was also Polish, and I was fascinated by this idea of a Polish lady, Polish woman doing those fantastic things abroad, having an international career, and also her interest in literature and literature theory. So I kept reading all of her writing. And one day I just plucked up the courage and wrote to her, introduced myself, and asked if I could come along to Gothenburg. So I flew in for one afternoon, and we spent hours and hours talking. And I asked her all the questions that I ever wanted to ask, but I was scared. But I asked them those questions took copious notes, and that meeting completely changed my life professionally and personally in many ways. So I keep asking Barbara questions every day by text or by phone and by email, and she always very patiently answers them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And I think it's common to us, these turning points. I also recognize both in Kjell and Sabina's stories. And I remember when I met Barbara during the narrative course, and then yeah, I don't remember very much about that, but I remember one afternoon also, it took probably 10 minutes and changed my life. And that's when I was a PhD student in Jönköping, and I had some sort of an issue with small towns, and I had a little bit of difficulties. So I went to Barbara and just said, yeah, I mean, I like Sweden, but yeah, I mean, I have a little bit, I don't know really what. And before I finished the sentence, she said, yeah, well, you can just be here. And that really was the most important moment of my academic career, and also one of the most important in my personal life. So now we would like to continue and ask our panelists to, if you could consider, if you could share with us what you consider the 3 most important academic insights from Barbara's work. You can be short, but if you could share with us the 3 main insights that you consider in her work. Shall we start with Kerstin again?
Thank you. Well, this will echo quite a lot of what has been said already. And to be short, I won't go into individual concepts or texts or ideas, but my three points I would bring up here is that first, always to be open, curious, and find inspirations from many sources. Be very, knowledgeable about how you combine these insights. Insights, be they theoretical or from other fields or from literature. The second very important insight for me is that the most important things you learn from the field. Take field studies very seriously. Listen and learn, and listen also to your own ideas that you get from the fields. Field studies has remained the most important inspiration also for me if I look back to where I learned a lot of things. And a third academic insight may be a bit more personal. I think I've learned, and I share that with many others, to believe in my own ideas, to develop and discuss them, to trust the data, find my own style of writing, and also how, of course, I say things is important. So about writings, words, formulations, and style are important, and just don't copy others. Find your own style.
Thank you. Thank you, Kerstin. I think we can recognize a lot of also. Rolf, what are your 3 main academic insights?
It's a very difficult question. What is 3? Is it 33 or is what how many 3s could you have? But I think 3 sorts of publications that strike me for the moment. One was about these paradoxes in control. That was a sort of eye-opener. And I think I understood a lot of things much better after that, actually. So Paradoxes was one sort of book, a very interesting book that she actually have stolen from me, so I don't have it anymore. So, and she got lost, gave it away to someone else. So if you find
She wants to say something, Rolf. Okay, no, she doesn't want to say something.
No. The second one is
he's lying. He's lying. I mean,
no, I'm never lying.
Book.
Truth. Rolf, state the truth.
I'm always right. That's the difference between us. The second one is a paper called I think it is, can a consultant be a social constructivist or something like that? It was different sort of discussion, different sort of theories, and I really like that. And of course the translation ideas is something that we all use and can survive a lot of in academia with. So I think that is sort of 3 of something.
Thank you, 3 of 333. Thank you, Rolf. And what about you, Kjell? What would you like to share?
Well, it is the first thing I learned from Barbara concerning methods was to think about research as a travel, where you travel from the desk to the field and back again without forgetting who you are. That is the kind of distinction between you as an author and researcher and the field that you're doing research on. And some of you have also mentioned this as a very important part of Barbara's work to try to theorize and also to develop methodological approaches to support that travel. And the notion of shadowing in her more recent work has also been part of that kind of understanding. That was important for me as a PhD student, and also when I'm supervising my own PhD students. I try to draw attention to that insight. And of course, Barbara's work on the narrative approach, and also the work, as I mentioned, drawing upon actor-network theory and her action nets. These are part of the important legacy, and also the part of the things that I find very useful even today. So it's not only about legacy; it is also about the future with my own supervision. So I'm very thankful for those tools and devices that you have equipped us with, Barbara. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Kjell. Barbarian cyborgs. Sabina, would you like to share your 3?
I won't be original in saying that Barbara is the advocate of fieldwork, so as opposed to many scholars who are into armchair theorizing. Barbara always wants to see things with her own eyes, and she's never delegated fieldwork or to other people, and she always did collect her own field material. So that's one thing, and it appeared in several contributions here today. Secondly, it's the relationship between understanding of management and the literature, which I completely love. I've got my PhD in literature, and I always was fascinated with the idea of literary theory and how it helps us understand social behavior. And Barbara does it wonderfully, and she legitimizes the use of literature. So in many ways, her books answer the question, is it life imitating art or art imitating life? Which way is the arrow pointing? Are we learning about management from films and books, or are the books written as being inspired by real life? And Barbara was one of the first people who had courage to write about it and legitimized this approach for the rest of us. And finally, the third thing is her style of writing. I just love this style of writing, and I use it almost like as a workshop. Analyze the sentences, I analyze the flow of the logic and the way she phrases her, puts down her thoughts in writing. It's a wonderful style full of literary devices, irony, grotesque, satire, self-deprecating tone at times, rhetorical devices, rhetorical questions, paragraphs starting with questions. It's a wonderful style which makes complex ideas really pleasure to read. So that I would say is the third lesson that I take out of Barbara's work.
Thank you.
Elena, I have to say, I'm very impressed by all these presentations, because I don't know if I could stay by 333, of course. not even that. So I don't know, what about you, Elena?
Yeah, well, we can go to the next question.
We can go to the next question. Yeah, that's better. So our next question is, what happens today and how these ideas are developed in the contemporary and future research work? Because we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we would like to discuss what happens, what you see coming based on all these different ideas and the different approaches and contributions made by Barbara. Kerstin, we ask you once again to be first out here.
Well, this is the most difficult question, because I feel like I'm an old sort of looking back. Everything was much better before. I do think there is a tendency for many scholars to just follow the predefined format about how to publish, how to do research, how to formulate research questions, and how to write, to follow the crowd and to think too much in terms of schools of thought. Too many do the same thing. So I would like to tell us all and to teach and give space for younger scholars to follow in the steps of Barbara and those 3 points that I pointed to encourage the ideas of individual scholars, to do careful field studies and to listen to the field, to be open to insights and to think about how you combine different insights into something new. I know it is difficult if you have this pressure all the time, but I think Barbara shows us the venues to work in this way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kerstin. Yes, it is a difficult question, and yeah, that's also why we would like to have this kind of to see what happens discussion, and we will invite all of you to contribute to this one.
Can I add one?
Yes, please.
Because I think that what another thing that has not been emphasized here is that Barbara has always been careful to point to the fact that if we live in Europe, we should also appreciate being in Europe. And if we live in Scandinavia, we should appreciate being Scandinavian scholars and not only looking at ourselves as we are in the periphery of the big sort of American publications and thoughts. And I think that we have to encourage also younger scholars really to think about the European, Scandinavian, wherever you are situated. That comes with listening to the field, of course, but it's also the theoretical fields. Mm-hmm.
I totally agree, I have to say. We will make a tour around the panel right now, and then maybe you can comment upon each other. We ask Rolf to give a next comment here and see.
I must say that Kerstin did put it in a beautiful way. Maybe I would say it's not only young scholars that should publish. I think we all have something to say also should do it. So I hope we see much more of Kerstin and Barbara publishing, and then so that's the only thing I had to add on.
That was thank you, Rolf. Kjell, would you like to?
Yes, I will be happy to comment on this. Actually, it's only a few weeks ago we had one of these Zoom seminars with accounting scholars in Trondheim Business School. Johanne Pettersen was commenting on a paper that Peter Skarbæk and I was writing on. It was about a police reform in Denmark. I haven't said that I was working at Copenhagen Business School since 20 years back in time. And she said, why don't you think about this as a traveling of organizational concepts in time and space, she said. And suddenly she was using Barbara's notions of traveling, of translating organizational change. And the reason why is that this stupid police reform that they have done in Denmark are now a copycat version in Norway. And I say stupid because it has been an ongoing scandal. People are robbed, they're not getting help, and all that kind of stuff. And the reason why is they have centralized the police organization using management accounting and controls and economics to justify the new centralized police. There is no connection to where people are living anymore. Right? And the same stuff is going on in Norway. It's a complete copy. And a core issue here is that you have these consultancy firms like McKinsey that are using economics theory of span of control, centralization, and economies of scale. And all these things are playing out again and again. We see it also in the Danish hospital reform. We see it in several major reforms in our Scandinavian societies, that these kind of management concepts are copying, pasted, and circulated to other countries. So we will actually try to do something more on this topic.
That sounds very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to see this. If you need some access, I guess we'll have someone who can help you out to see what happens within the Swedish police force as well.
Thank you.
Sabina, would you please?
It's a very difficult question. I found this one most difficult to answer, in that I see the role of Barbara's writing in our lives as I said earlier, legitimizing our approaches, legitimizing our unique interests, and not following what was earlier described here as the politics of the career. You know, we should all have the same courage as Barbara has in terms of speaking with her own strong voice, in many ways ignoring disciplinary boundaries and ignoring the pressures that the new neoliberal academia places on us. So I would probably say this is where her work has most influence on young people and gives us, I'm not counting myself in the young category, but younger people courage to speak with their own voice. And in terms of the actual ideas, and especially now with the pandemic and what's happening, I have always been fascinated with Barbara's work on materiality and technology and how materiality affects us. And the pandemic has brought about the whole question of how we perceive materiality. Do we really need those buildings around us? This event is successfully taking place without one building in which we are all located. So Barbara herself wrote in one of her papers posed the question, is a school without a building still a school? Does a school need a building? And in the same way, we could ask a question now, is our university a building, or is it a community, is a collegium, or what are we? So I think intellectually, the questions Barbara posed in her work are very significant today and make us all wonder about how we are all connected through technology, through buildings, or in any other ways as a community of scholars.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sabina. Elena?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to maybe open the discussion, and I'm sure that there are many people that would like to share their thoughts or their stories. So please, let's open for more voices to get in.
If I may ask, Sabina mentioned the pandemic right now. So I will just ask Kerstin, Rolf, and Kjell, would you like to add something about tools for exploring what's going on right now?
I figure out that we actually published a book a few weeks ago, Barbara and I and two other writers, about searching for new welfare models. And I think that may be sort of a new way for Barbara telling the world what they should do, actually. And that could be an interesting future.
I was thinking also whether, I mean, of course, we have much to learn from the pandemic and from to learn to live with the pandemic, and that opens up a lot of new research questions, of course. In a way, I think it also opens up for the perspective that Barbara has developed and has taught us all, and we have followed, with thinking in action nets, in narratives, in translations. So maybe the world is becoming more ready to sort of really, because everyone has had to question the taken for grantedness. We have all seen the paradoxical way of living and the complexities we live with in a daily life. So maybe this is the time when we really people can listen to these kinds of research results that sort of question our taken for grantedness of structures and boundaries, as we have talked about today, and planning.
Yes.
Kjell, would you like to?
As I mentioned, my first own kind of issue with technology was very much helped with Barbara as my supervisor. And now we are sitting here over this interface, a new technology interface, which is a kind of adaptation to another non-human, this virus. So I think this kind of interest that Barbara has showed for so many years concerning these complex networks of human and non-humans as part of what constitute organizations is very much facilitated by this coronavirus. But I think, unfortunately, that is what it takes to also get organizational and management scholars in general to pay some more attention to technologies and the role of technologies and non-humans for our societies. And speaking about that, now that we have this new second wave, it is also a reminder of the role of built infrastructures, because the pandemic seems to, or the virus at least, seems to prosper in more confined built spaces. So it addresses new questions about how to design our workspaces and of course our hospital and healthcare facilities. So there's a whole new set of questions that pops up. And I think the kind of work that Barbara has done for the last 30 years or so is very much part of the possible solution, at least for thinking more creatively around that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is very well put and quite intriguing. We have the tools and now we just have to go out and study this. Barbara, would you like to add something to this or?
No, but I see that there are people in chat that wanted to say something, like Hugo, for example.
Yes.
Elena said, please share, but he didn't get the voice.
No. Hugo, where are you?
I hear, just listening.
Hello,
So
Hugo.
how are you? Very good to see you. Well, I felt it was better to write and share my experiences, but I have a much probably more emotional and rational, a mix of emotional and rational relation with Barbara. I would say that, you know, I said something that this capacity to shift from one language to the other, that in particular in our case, like maybe you as well, Elena, and myself. So Barbara is fluency in, I don't know, at least 4 languages, probably much more than but I can speak in English with her, but also in Italian. I tried to teach her Catalan language and Spanish, but we have no time to do this. But we met, what I say, so many times in Barcelona and Buenos Aires in very Spanish context. But nothing else to say. That I would say that is, I have always this feeling that I'm permanently following her, even, from probably more intensively after finishing my PhD, really. So it's something, something that usually said is exactly the opposite of what happened, right? It is, so I have the experience of having 2 PhDs, so it's a completely different experience of my first supervision than the way of working with Barbara, and really extremely happy to have her in my life. Really, it's a permanent presence there, and not only for her readings, but it's much more difficult to express with words. But she's always, I know that she's always there, really. This is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much, Hugo. Thank you so much for this. And this permanent presence is, I think, what many of us, at least me, also feel, even in the fluidity. I would like to read out a comment that Maria Jose left, and she has left now. And she writes, and I think that also many of us can relate to this, one of the main things that she admires about Barbara is how she takes care of the younger researchers and connect them through her action nets. And I think that's really, really we can recognize. I think that many of us have been connected to each other through Barbara and continue to work with each other through this with some sort of common plasma that gathers us. Does anybody else want to share something or say a few words?
Maybe I can represent one of the younger scholars then.
Thanks, Gabriela.
Thank you. Well, you were asking about one of the first encounters with Barbara. And for me, that was actually in Bangladesh, which might be surprising. I don't know, have you been to Bangladesh, Barbara? Or did you know you have been to Bangladesh? It was an encounter with your writings, rather. So one of the books that I was recommended to read and to bring was Writing Management. And I thought it was extremely useful when doing my field work. I was talking to a lot of workers working in the export-oriented garment industry on wages. And I was also talking to managers and people at very different positions and from very different views. So this book helped me to compile everything in one thesis. It was for my bachelor thesis, so it's still very basic, but still to regard all the voices just as important, and to bring in all the different perspectives from the different persons. It was like a tool that I could use when writing it, and also creative ideas as putting the methods chapter at the end and things that you wouldn't expect for a professor to recommend, because you had been told that it should be this structure and this way. So it's something that inspired me also to continue my studies at and have a master's degree and later on doctorate. And it's something that I try to bring to my students when I teach now as well, and to bring some of that knowledge further as well. So thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you. Pierre, would you like to
emphasize what I've been writing?
Yes, exactly.
No. You have been. It's an amazing intensity, stubborn.
Oh, Pierre, you just muted. Wait. Pierre, you happen to mute yourself just after stubborn.
Am I unmuted?
Now, yes. You stopped
unmuted.
at stubborn.
Somebody muted me. Oh shit. Anyway, no, but intensity, stamina, courage, and waking up, and sort of also being able to establish yourself and helping a whole generation in this hermetic, I would say, Swedish landscape, because it takes you have to be pretty clever, I think, in order to be able to say all that you said and influence people in the way you did in this territory where you are working, and you've been so successful doing it, and a model for the future, maybe the future welfare state. I don't know, but you are amazing, and it's fantastic. I mean, we all know exactly what it means when Barbara listens to something and really gets kind of very, what shall we say, sour expression on her face. And you think she doesn't like what she listens to, but actually she loves it, and she would have loved to say it herself. So, and probably write it herself too. So you see that, she got an idea, and now she's retiring, and 2 more years and there will be a book. No bullshit, action. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Pierre.
Thank you.
Linda, would you like to share? Maybe Linda
left. Maybe Linda left.
Maybe Linda left, yes. And I have to say, on a different note, it seems like you also attract a number of dog lovers. Usually I would see Barbara taking photos of cats, but it seems like your friends really are into dogs.
Congratulations, Barbara.
So, I don't know, Barbara, if you have a comments to the animal issue here.
Well, as to dogs, I just 2 days ago saw the movie Dog Days. I really recommend it. It's mostly about dogs, but it's a very good. It keeps you in a good mood during those gray pandemic days. Well, in general, I'm so moved that I'm ready to cry, but I'm not going to offer this performance this time around. I will do it after you're gone. Well, what I wanted to say that it's amazing for me how you present me as a sort of unique person, but perhaps you don't realize how much of it is luck. To begin with, I'm from a lucky generation. My parents, and even my older brothers, I mean, they went through wars, through God knows how many traumatic experiences. Okay, you guys in Sweden don't know it, but we people from other countries know it. So, my generation is very lucky in that sense that we never suffered, well, until now probably, or something. And then there is also personal luck. I just read somebody, now I forgot because I didn't think it was so relevant, but I was thinking about that too. It's not only hard work and ambitions and all this stuff that we are told at school. There is also a sort of help from luck. And I made quite a few very stupid decisions in my life that were very lucky in consequences. So that's so much for for the rational decision making. Because of course you could make a rational decision if you could foresee consequences, but nobody can. The foreseeing of consequences assumes that everything will be like before, but you know, if that was the problem, we wouldn't have any problem. As to the future, I don't know. As you know, I believe in fashions, and not the least in research fashions. And to me, well, I have lived during those 50 years. I went at least to 3 waves. I was lucky to be in a sort of a country that was somewhat backwards, and thanks to it, we knew very, very well how to do what later was called qualitative studies and all this kind of stuff. And then came fantastic statistics and I mean sort of a new wave of positivism, and we survived that. And then came sort of revolution of the late 70s and the early 80s, like John van Manen was mentioning also. Well, it seems to me now that maybe because of metrics or something, you know, things may go back or towards something which I maliciously call positivism light, you know, like Coca-Cola light, yeah. Because the real positivists at least knew why they were doing what they were doing, whereas the present positivists do what they do because everybody does what they do, which is a very, very sort of strong argument. But I must say that what Shasti said gave me a hope, because maybe exactly the pandemic will not allow to things go in sort of their normal route. Maybe there will be some shocks and some sort of awakenings that will cause different developments. And I must say that today's the first time when I thought that the pandemics can have positive results, because of course we wouldn't be meeting here in so many, you know, people from so many countries, from so many places, if that was supposed to be in real life. So maybe we all learn something different, and you know, that can take a different way, which I'm not able to predict, because it's for you guys, for you younger guys, because there are some people in my age here too. So let's hope that that something good may come even from something which is obviously not very good, at least now. So thank you very much. I'm going to cry now, okay?
I think Elena, Agnes, and for all of us, it's we who should say thank you. Thank you for letting us, helping us out and supporting us. And I would like to thank the panel very much. Thank you, Kerstin. Thank you, Rolf. Thank you, Kjell. Thank you, Sabina, for very nice and very interesting input. We continue to work with this, that's for sure. Agnes, for very nicely produced films, which we will also put, I think, on the GRI website. I hope so. So thank you for doing a marvelous job here. Elena.
Yeah, thank you also to the voices that we have heard in the film. John, Marta and Linda, Fabrizio, Frank and Guya. And also thank you everybody for joining. And now there are so many, so many things that are shared in the chat and the comments. And thank you so much, Barbara, for your permanent support. And I will also not say more because I will also cry when we close this. But thank you so much, Ulla, for